You've been here before. You leave a conversation and later, alone, fragments come back. The way they paused. The moment you nodded, not because you agreed, but because it felt easier. You replay it again. Why did that affect me so much? Because it didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like understanding. When was the last time you left a conversation feeling moved and couldn't explain how? There is a structure to that. This is emotional engineering. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Imagine this. You're in a meeting, on a call, sitting across from someone you respect. They say something that lightly contradicts what you assumed. Not aggressively, not dismissively, just enough to interrupt your internal script. You feel it, that tiny recalibration, that half second where your confidence softens. You don't argue, you don't shut down, you lean in, your attention sharpens, you're suddenly listening for alignment. That moment matters more than you realize. When something disrupts a belief, even slightly, the mind opens, not permanently, not helplessly, but enough to seek coherence, enough to become receptive. This is how influence actually begins, not with persuasion, with interruption. Think about the last time someone said something that made you stop mid-thought. You didn't walk away, you stayed with it. It bothered you in a quiet, unfinished way. That wasn't weakness. That was your mind trying to resolve something that no longer fit neatly. And whoever helps restore that sense of order becomes the reference point for what comes next. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He watched power operate up close, in courts, negotiations, betrayals. What he noticed wasn't brutality. It was subtlety. People weren't moved by force. They were moved by interpretation. Those who could shape how events were perceived rarely needed to dictate what people did next. So here's a better question. Who's shaping your interpretations right now? Here's another scene you'll recognize. You're talking with someone who seems to have answers, but they don't give them all at once. They offer part of an idea, then they stop. They let it hang. You feel the urge to fill the space. You ask a follow-up, then another. Not because they told you to, but because the gap is uncomfortable. People assume influence comes from certainty. It doesn't. It comes from pacing, from understanding that unfinished understanding pulls harder than finished explanations. This is why some conversations feel sticky. You keep thinking about them long after they end. The mind hates loose ends. It returns to them automatically. You might even notice yourself checking the time after the conversation, surprised by how long you stayed, or feeling a subtle anticipation about the next one. That's not dependency, it's attention being shaped. And attention is where all influence lives. Have you noticed this? The people who hold your attention longest aren't the ones who answer everything. They're the ones who leave just enough unsaid. Because when you fill in the space, when you connect the dots, it no longer feels like their idea. It feels like yours. Now watch closely. Someone makes an observation about you, not a judgment, not a label, just something specific enough to feel accurate. They say it calmly, then they stop talking. You feel a small jolt, not defensiveness, but recognition. Your mind starts supplying context before you notice it's happening. You replay moments, you test the idea against memory. You arrive at a conclusion, and it feels personal. Because it is. You weren't told what to think. You realized something. That difference is everything. When the mind generates its own conclusion, it treats it differently. It protects it, defends it, integrates it into how you see yourself. This is why the most influential people rarely explain themselves at length. They let silence do the work. They understand that implication travels further than instruction. Most people never notice this happening. They leave conversations convinced the decision was theirs. They justify it, act on it, defend it. They never trace it back to the moment the direction quietly shifted. But you felt that shift before. The question that wasn't neutral, the observation that landed too close to home, the silence that made you keep talking when you meant to stop. Once you see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. And that's when things get dangerous, because you realize how few people ever notice it at all. There's another moment you probably recognize. Someone describes you, your habits, your reactions, your patterns, with unsettling precision. Not critically, not flatteringly, just clearly. It makes you feel exposed and strangely relieved. That relief isn't accidental. When someone reflects something you already sense but haven't articulated, it brings coherence. The mind relaxes into recognition. But here's what almost no one talks about. No reflection is complete. Every mirror highlights some things and leaves others in shadow, and whatever gets highlighted becomes more salient, more central, more, this is who I am. Over time, that salience shapes identity, subtly, gradually, but meaningfully. Machiavelli observed that people are guided less by careful reasoning than by what feels immediate and relevant. Not because they're foolish, but because urgency always outruns reflection. Those who understand this don't argue. They decide what feels important right now. Think about the people who've influenced how you see yourself most. Did they lecture you, or did they notice something, name it cleanly, and let you carry it forward? What did they choose to reflect back? And just as importantly, what did they leave out? At some point, something shifts. An old explanation stops fitting, a new one appears, and with it, a slightly different version of you, more aware, more resolved, more certain about what something means. You don't just think differently, you see yourself differently. That's why reframes can feel like relief, like growth, like finally understanding something that's been quietly bothering you for years. And once a self-concept changes, it's protected. Questioning it feels personal. Going back feels like regression. You can debate beliefs. You defend identities. Think about it. Every belief shift that felt like waking up. Every realization that felt like progress. Someone may have helped shape that transition, intentionally or not to harm you, but to guide the outcome. And here's the uncomfortable part. You've probably done this to someone else without realizing it. Influence doesn't arrive as advice. It arrives as experience. A sentence that follows you home. A question you keep turning over. A realization that feels self-generated. One emotional truth, approached from different angles until it lands. And here's what people rarely admit. This works best on people who believe they're hard to influence. Reflective people. Curious people. People who replay conversations and ask why. Especially them. Because they're looking for patterns. And when they find one that fits, they don't just accept it. They integrate it. You're one of those people. You wouldn't still be here if you weren't. Most people would have clicked away by now, told themselves this was too dark, too cynical, too uncomfortable. You didn't. You stayed because part of you already recognized this. You just hadn't seen it articulated this clearly before. Most people feel the recognition and move on. They return to the same conversations, the same dynamics, the same rooms, and later they replay moments in their head, wondering why they said yes, why something felt off, why someone else seemed to get exactly what they wanted without ever asking. They assume the answer is inside them, that they're too trusting, too agreeable, too emotional. They never find the answer because it wasn't inside them. It was in the system being used around them. You didn't move on, you stayed. You tracked the pattern. You noticed the architecture. Once you see emotional engineering clearly, you can't unsee it. And once you can see it, the relationship changes. This isn't about becoming manipulative. It's about becoming fluent. You're already inside these systems, at work, in relationships, in negotiations, in everyday conversations. Pretending they don't exist doesn't protect you from them. Understanding them does. And here's the part that makes this irreversible. By recognizing this structure, by feeling it as it's happening, you've already crossed the line most people never do. You can't go back to not noticing the pause, the unfinished sentence, the moment your attention sharpens without permission. That recognition is the skill. From now on, every conversation will give you a signal, a moment where you feel the shift before it completes. And in that moment, you won't be guessing anymore. You'll know exactly what's happening. You're already inside the system, The only difference now is that it no longer works without your awareness, and awareness changes everything.